Welcome to On Texas Football. It's time for Second Watch with Rod Babers. I'm Bobby Burton. This episode brought to you by our friend Dr. Brett Robin, orthopedic specialist in Austin, Killeen, and Georgetown. We'll talk a little bit more and give you more information about Brett in a little bit and what he's been up to since his playing days in Austin. But I got to ask you, Rod B., you this second watch for you, the general overall thoughts before we get into some specifics on your second watch. Was there anything that really struck you in the second watch? Was it the run game? Was it the pass game? Was it the defense? What was the overwhelming take on second watch?
Well, on offense, there was no doubt. I mean, it's hard not to rewatch it and have fun watching the Texas run game. So, I mean, that's how dominant it actually was. And on the rewatch, it's just when you look at how stubborn and how bullish Sark was on one potential concept, then you get it. And we'll get into that. Well, Sark was very stubborn. I always say Sark's got to be a little bit more stubborn about what works. Like, if it works, just keep pounding it until they learn how to stop it. And this was actually one of those cases in the run game. But on the defensive side, I actually thought, for the first time, Texas played against a quarterback that could solve problems, and Cade Klubnik solved a lot of problems that Texas defense usually presents to quarterbacks that discombobulate them and disrupt them. And he was able to make some plays. And so we'll talk about what some people are saying, they were exposed. I just think it's, hey, playing against a good quarterback, that's what happens. And Texas hadn't played, whether you want to say Carson Beck's a good quarterback or not as a prospect. Cade Klubnik is playing the position right now at a higher level than even Carson Beck is. That we can make the argument who's a better quarterback, who has better traits, and who has a better skill set overall. All that's a different discussion for a different day. But there's no doubt Cade Klubnik played the quarterback position at times at a really high level, and he made some plays against the best defense in the country, in my opinion. I still think they're the best defense in the country. I think that's what happens when you play a really good quarterback, and if they're going to make this run, they're going to play another good quarterback coming up later on, no doubt.
Yeah, I got this question for you because I watched it a second time as well, actually a third time already. The question, I thought Texas beat them up front on both sides of the ball more often than not. And these games are a lot of times won in the trenches. And while we can sit here and talk about run game and the defense, I mean, maybe it's because half of it's because Clemson didn't have a run game to support it. They tried to manufacture one, but it just felt to me on my second watch, at least, that the one thing that stood out is how much better Texas was on the fronts, offense and defense, both overall. They seem to hold up a little bit better. You agree with that?
Yep, I totally agree. Texas had a run game and was able to stop their traditional run game and try to make Cade Klubnik beat him with hero ball, which, by the way, he
pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. He made some, but you're not going to beat Texas playing hero ball. You're not going to do that. I mean, so I do understand putting him in that position. Let's see if he can play hero ball. But in the end, Texas was able to obviously win by double digits. So it wasn't as close as it would have seemed. I just think Longhorn fans hadn't been that stressed about their defense in a long time because their defense, Texas defense, has been just really, really good all season. And I think that's what a really good quarterback can do. He can expose some vulnerabilities within the Texas defense. And I think Cade Klubnik and Clemson did that a little bit.
Okay. All right. We're going to get to your points that you wanted to point out now. Again, this is this episode brought to you by our friend, Dr. Brett Robin. Thanks to him and the Austin Orthopedic Institute for their sponsorship of the Second Watch with Rod Babers here at On Texas Football. Dr. Robin, a former Longhorn running back, I remember him out there, Rod, knows what it takes to stay in the game, and he's here for athletes of all ages, specializing in musculoskeletal health. Dr. Robin treats joint pain and injuries with a conservative approach first, but also offers advanced surgical options, including arthroscopic procedures, fracture management, and total joint replacements. With convenient offices in Austin, Georgetown, and Killeen, Dr. Robin is accepting new patients now. If you're looking for a top-notch orthopedic specialist, give Dr. Robin a call, 512-856-1000. That's 512-856-1000. And get back to your active lifestyle and doing what you love. Just give him a call, 512-856-1000. All right, Rod, here's what you wrote down for me. We're going to go over the offense, the two things you want to talk about that first. And you said run game, the secret sauce
That's right.
What do you mean by the secret sauce when you told me that or wrote that to me earlier today?
Oh, there's no doubt. The secret sauce. And I think there are a couple of elements to it, right? I mean, talk about maybe different ingredients to it. But when you end up losing, multiple offensive linemen, you lose Jake Majors, you lose Cadwell, you talk about key pieces to your offensive line in a college football playoff game. And still able to run for 292 or whatever they ran for. Also starting running back, by the way, another running back, by the way. But your starting running back right now also goes down. Then I started harkening back to the Texas A&M game. You lose Kelvin Banks, your best player, best lineman in the country, in the first quarter of that game on the road, big environment, big game, and yet you're still able to have one of your best rushing performances of the season against A&M. So, and I started thinking about the two performances and what were the similarities, and it's the concept, their bread and butter. It is the wide zone, and so Texas if you go look at taking the Georgia game out of it, in 3 of the last 4 games, they've had their 3 best rushing performances of the season. And I don't think that is a coincidence. I think it took them a while after the running back injuries at the running back position. I think it took them a little while to really find their identity in the running game, and they found it around what was their key concept in the running game with Bijan and Rojo, and also with Jonathan Brooks. They end up coming back to it with Trey Weissner, his visions and his patience and his burst, which is perfect for that wide zone. So I went back and looked at the explosive runs. That's runs of at least 10 yards. I counted of running back runs, take the quarterback runs out of it because Quinn's had a couple and Arch had an explosive run there too. Last 4 games, explosive runs, traditional handoffs to running backs. I counted 22 of them, and I got 16 of them coming from wide zone or a variation of it, split wide zone. And that's the beauty, also part of one of the ingredients of the secret sauce. Not only, of course, you got your main ingredient, which is the outside zone. And, they've gotten some explosive plays that duo, and they had a pin and pull, beautiful pin and pull concept. I believe got Weisner the touchdown. So they got some variety in there. They got a couple of counters in the last 4 games that have also broke for explosive runs, but nothing's coming close to the effectiveness and efficiency that they're getting when they run the wide zone and the outside zone. And so what I like about Sark's approach to it is he knows that this is my bread and butter, and everybody knows it. It's no secret. They've done. I mean, you can go talk to anybody who studies film on Texas, and they'll say, "Yeah, you better know how to stop the wide zone and the outside zone. You better figure it out." Even Georgia, all right, they knew they had to stop it. It's the ways he gets to it and how many variations he has of it. So it's a great saying among coaches, right? It's not the plays, it's the ways. It ain't the plays you got. You may have 4 or 5 plays you like, but how many ways you get to them? Formations, personnel groupings, and playing with all the different disguises, or whether it be the different presentations you can throw out there. And Sark is great at that. It's wide zone, but he's gonna get to it from 11, 12. 21 personnel in the pony package. He's gonna get to it, out of 3x1. He's gonna get to it 3x1 with a nub. He's gonna get to it out of 2x2 formation. He's gonna get, he'll get to it with a bunch formation, with a compressed condensed set, with a triangle bunch. It's so many different ways. You're thinking, oh man, he's throwing something else, but he's gonna throw in a reverse off of it too, and then the split wide zone coming back the other way. It never really looks the same. It'd be different. Now I will say that. That Jaden Blue, both of his touchdowns are the exact same play. Same play, and it's we learned later Quinn checking to it, which makes it that makes sense as to why it's the exact same play, exact same formation. That he ends up hitting those 2 touchdowns, a 77-yard, I think it was a 38-yarder or something like that for the touchdown. But usually it's different ways that he's coming to those types of plays that he really loves. And at the end of the season, he recognizes like, man, these are the same concepts, but go look at the formations and the personnel groupings and then the pre-snap motions and shifts associated with it. And they're always a little bit different, but the main ingredient in the secret sauce is always the same.
Yeah, it's the wide zone. That's what's popping for the big plays when you start talking about explosive game plays. One of the things I think is interesting, you mentioned 3 of the last 4 games have it's the most rushing yards Texas has had in a game all season. That's very telling because, basically A&M was supposed to be a good defense. Clemson in the college football playoffs, Kentucky, okay. But Texas running the ball effectively late, except against Georgia.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that. All right. The next thing you wanted to mention.
Let me mention one more thing with the running game, though. Just to go make sure I sum it up. The pistol also was something that, because both of those run from Jaden Blue were in the pistol. You had another explosive run, I believe, as well out of the pistol. 3 explosive runs out of the pistol. And then I went back and looked at the Georgia game, and you didn't have a lot of explosive runs, but one of your explosive runs was a split wide zone out of the pistol. The pistol adds a downhill running element for Texas. So I got to go back and look. I haven't looked at the last 4 games, but I'm going to go back and look at Kentucky and A&M and see how many of those runs, explosive runs, they have been from the pistol too. Maybe that's something else that they've added as an ingredient in the sauce to give them a downhill running element. All right, to the run game that they didn't have. You don't have with the shotgun, and you ain't going to put Quinn Ewers in the center that often.
And that also keeps the safety more honest.
Yes.
That's the whole idea behind that, is it keeps the safety more honest and can't cheat to one side or the other, because the running back's not leading to that.
Yes, he's not unbalanced.
Yes, exactly. That's interesting that the pistol's doing that. All right, the next piece you had for us to talk about is the use of multi-motion and how it's having an effect on Sark's offense right now. What do you, I guess that multi-motion, just describe that. Is that when people move at different times and motion in and back? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's something I think I've made up, but it's when you have a player in motion, either one player motioning or shifting multiple times on one play, or multiple players shifting or motioning on the same play. That's so because I started looking at things and you have that. I mean, in this game alone, essentially you had your 3 longest plays, your longest reception, and your 2 longest runs had multi-motion scenarios, multi-motion examples on those plays. So I was looking back and tracking them, and it's one of those things where I think Sark's using more of. I think it's his way of being extreme with motion instead of just having more plays with motion, which is what you automatically think. Well, you see that the analytics tell you, well, your yards per rush and yards per attempt and explosive play rate, everything is better, right? With motion, targets to motion. Can be talking about that all the time. That's targeting a player in motion prior to the snap, at the time of the snap. So analytics tell you everything is better with motion. If that is the case, then you would think, oh, just have motion on every play, right? But Sark doesn't want to do that, because Sark's motion rates are still hovering around between 55 and 60%. You got some guys in the NFL now, they're at 80% pre-snap motion rate, 70%. And yet Sark hasn't gone that extreme. There are some halves of football, big games, where you do see the pre-snap motion rates increase to close to 70%, 75%. But usually by the end of the game, it ends up, balancing out to around 55%, somewhere like that. I mean, the first half of this game, he was at 58% pre-snap motion rate. I think his way of being extreme is multi-motion. And so I'm going to have to go back and watch, 2021, 2022, and 2023. It's going to take a while and find out how many of these multi-motion plays have we seen prior to this season. But I feel like this season, just a guy who's watched every game multiple times and done the film study and tracking it, I feel like I started tracking it this year for a reason, because I think I've seen it more. And I think that's his way of being extreme with motion, instead of putting motion in 80% of your plays, which is what, at least the logic would tell you if you're looking at the analytics. It's like, no, but I can just have multi-motion on, more plays, and maybe it'll have the same effect. And it seems like, at least looking at some of the examples, that you are getting a really high explosive play rate out of multi-motion plays too.
That's interesting, Rod. That's a good thing you picked up on that. I've seen it happen, but I haven't noticed it having an amplified effect on the outcome of the plays, right?
I think it does, just because it gives the defense more to process. I remember Brian Harsin. I had a meeting with Brian Harsin, and he always said he loved motion because motion causes emotion. And they always tell you, don't make decisions, all right, while you're emotional. Don't make emotional decisions, because those are bad decisions, irrational decisions. He said, I want defenders making bad, irrational, emotional decisions. And he's kind of, and the logic always stuck out with me. And that was years ago, but he's right. He used to call it like funk. He called it funk in his offense. That's what he called motion. But he's right about that, in that it forces defenders to have to process more. And when they have to process more, if you have multiple things to process, the chance of you making a mistake or missing something or misidentifying something increases exponentially, in my opinion.
Good stuff there. Right? So basically, secret sauce with the run game is the wide zone, the use of multi-motion by Sark, something that you're going to start to track as effective or more effective. What about the defense? You talked about early in this one, and this is how you want to sum up this. You asked, was the coverage of the Longhorns exposed? Yeah. Did the Longhorns have issues in coverage against Cade Klubnik, or was it something else? And you went back and looked at it a little bit in your second watch. What is it that you found that you want to share with folks?
I think, and like I said, obviously some of this requires a lot more deep diving and rabbit holing, but I feel like there was a lot of variety actually in the coverages when I went back and looked at it. Saw more split field coverages, combo coverages than I think I've seen. They covered 2, which Texas does not play a lot of. So on cover 2, they were in man, as we saw in the game. Cover 4, cover 3, that's kind of their bread and butter. I mean, they're in cover 3, cover 4, match 3, match 4, match quarters, probably 65-70% of the time. I think my theory here as to why maybe you saw a lot more variety in coverages is because they knew they were playing a good quarterback for the first time. We're like, man, what's when you're playing a good veteran quarterback and we're playing in the NFL, at least the logic is you're playing a great quarterback. I got to throw a lot at him. I got to throw different looks at this guy so to give him a lot to process. So I can't show him the same thing every time. He's going to dice me up, right? Because he's just a good veteran quarterback. I think that was some of that thought process behind, let's throw some variety at Cade Klubnik. And let's throw some different looks at him and not just so much of what he's seen on film. I feel like that's just what I saw. You go look at the touchdowns, right? Your first touchdown was essentially you're in man, and a mesh concept gets you. Essentially that it was almost like a shallow screen.
It's a crossing route, is what it was.
Yeah, shallow screen, the mesh concept, the shallow crossing route. So you're in man coverage there, and there was target to motion actually. So Gilbo crossed the formation, which usually is a man-to-man indicator to the quarterback. Like, oh, guy crossed the formation with him in motion. He's in man-to-man coverage. Then they came back with the rub route. The other 2 touchdowns, based on what I saw, I think you were in combo coverages. I think you were playing man to the boundary and zone to the field. Go back and look at it. And the one they gave up the 7-yard touchdown, which was when they after that 10-play drive. There's a reason they took out Jalen Gilbo after that drive at nickel. Go back and watch that drive. There's like 3 plays on that drive. One with Janae Barron and Jalen Gilbo is a curl route that was completed. Go watch their exchange. Then go watch the exchange. The first play they had, I believe it was a 7 route to the sideline, out route by the inside receiver. And Texas was in cover 3. Gilbo went down with the shallow out route. And go watch the exchange between him and Malik Muhammad. Same drive. And then the touchdown essentially is, I believe, Gilbo's eyes are in the wrong place in the red zone. I could be mistaken if that was on the zone side. So I don't think it's a coincidence that after that they put Janae Barron in at nickel.
Yeah.
For the rest of the game in the fourth quarter.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. So I think they started picking on certain players. And Malik Muhammad also was one. So I went and looked at all the different, receptions on Malik Muhammad down the stretch because it happened in the second half. That definitely was one of their adjustments. Because in the first half, they weren't really picking on either those guys. They picked on Gilbo a little bit early and linebackers. And matter of fact, that other touchdown, the basically the wheel route, it ends up being 4 verticals, kind of. Except they have 3 of them on the same side. The tight end ends up running vertical kind of up the seam, and then you see the wide receiver Malik Muhammad plays man because they're man on the boundary. Everybody's playing man on the boundary. They actually they motion a guy over. They play man on the boundary. I believe there's an offset wing there. Malik Muhammad takes the number 1. If I'm not mistaken, Michael Taft takes the number 2 receiver there, right? The number 2. And then the linebackers are a little confused about who takes the wheel and who takes the motion guy in the flat. And they don't know whether they're going to bump it. If you bump it, I think the outside guy takes the wheel route of the running back, and then the inside guy would just take the flat route. But if they were actually going to carry it means you go with the guy. And I don't know if they were carrying it because he comes from the other side of the formation and the safety doesn't travel. Safety bumps it. So I think they were, because they were zone to the field, man to the boundary. And so I think they were man there, and then they won the reel, and then Texas linebackers are confused about who should take the man. But getting back to the Malik Muhammad things, so I went back and looked at it. There's basically technique issues. There's not really mental errors here for him. There's a 12-yard reception that he allowed where he's playing catch technique, and he doesn't catch the receiver. Catch the receivers when you're trying to essentially you're trying to reroute the receiver, but from a distance. When you play catch technique, and once you catch him, you're going to match him, and that'll be your guy, right? But you're doing it from a distance. Charles plays catch, and he basically doesn't end up rerouting the receiver effectively. There's another 12-yard reception where he's a little confused about the communication. Go watch before the snap. He's trying to communicate with his fellow DBs, and it's ineffective. After the snap, he's really frustrated, and he kind of throws his hands up. And he's like, what is going on? So I don't know. I don't know what's happened. I'm not in that room, so I don't know. So there was confusion there. Then there was a 28-yard. He was in cover 3. He lets the post route go, the number 2 receiver, which was the tight end. Right now, I believe he's coming from an offset position. He runs the 7 route. So it ends up being like a switch route, like a scissors route. But he comes off the post, which I think was the way he was supposed to do at the time. He came off of that post, but he took a bad angle.
It cut forward instead of sitting back.
It cut underneath it, like it was like the ball was gonna be on a line, and the ball wasn't on a line. He put air under it, and he cut underneath it. It was like if he just sat where he was and just kind of waited for it, he probably would have got a pick or at least a PBU. Yep. So that was a bad angle he took to the football. But he was in the right position and he did the right thing there. He just took a bad angle. There was a 20, there was a 29, that slot fade. Remember slot fade on him? That was on the 3rd down. That was brutal. That hurt. They basically, it's just good. This to me is just good play design. They motion a guy outside of him to turn him into the slot, give the receiver a 2-way go. And that force, he's an outside corner usually. They turned into a slot fade. Now he's got outside leverage and he's playing bump and run. Like he's playing bump and run coverage. And I think he locks his hips. Am I saying lock your hips? You try to jam or you try to at least contact the receiver with the wrong hand. Say if the receiver is cutting outside to my right and I use it to my right and I use my right hand to try to contact him, I lock my hips. You want to use the opposite hand because it opens your hips to the receiver so you can run. You lock your hips, you can't run. The receiver often will swim you after that. Grab your hand and swim you, and then totally lock your hips, and then you got to turn all the way around and get him by then he's on top of you. Guy got on top of him after that. It's a beautiful ball, but that's just a technique thing. It's just simple. You lock your hips like that, it can be very dangerous with a really explosive wide receiver. Then there's the 30-yard deep. There was another deep reception. Guys, perfect catch, perfect throw. Sometimes you remember on the sideline there? I mean, My only advice would be try to pin him. They did the same thing to Gavin Holmes later on in the game.
That deep ball to the left, yeah.
And he caught it right out of bounds. He like tapped his foot. His foot was like half on the white.
Yeah.
That's what you got to do. You got to make sure that he's on the white, man. And he's gonna catch it. He's gonna catch out of bounds. They call it the look and lean. You're gonna look back for the ball, but lean on that receiver. Lean him all the way out of bounds. Like I'm leaning up. And I don't know what happened. I leaned on him, and he gave him weight. He gave him just enough space. That's what I mean. It was a perfect throw and a perfect catch. There ain't no defense for that, guys. I can tell you that. Go to Rod B. Some of those happened to me. Y'all probably can pull them up too. So going back and looking at it, I don't think it was as bad as some people made it out to be. I think Malik Muhammad is a hell of a player, man. I think he's a hell of a cover guy. Guys who can cover like me, you do have bad games. I had several. I won't list them all here, but I remember those games. I'm like, I don't have it. And I felt like he was just mentally not locked in. He's a technician. We're talking about he's a technician. Technicians are always on the little details about locking your hips, right? About being in phase and out of phase. About being, if you're playing catch technique, you can't whiff. You got to contact that receiver. Otherwise, you just made his job easy. You're playing 7-on-7 out there, and he's playing against air. So that was just some technique issues that he will not. I've not seen him have a game like that. I don't think he'll have a game like that in the future. So I think they made some adjustments and they picked on some guys in the secondary. And when you have a good quarterback, you can do that. But not a lot of teams will have that luxury. against Texas.
It's interesting you talk about that. It's almost like you get a couple of plays that aren't really your issue, maybe like Jalen Gilbo and him having a miscommunication, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden another play comes your way, and it just it starts a spiral where you can't breathe, you know. But those are good. Those are good points.
We call it quicksand, Robbie. We call it quicksand.
I have a question for you, because a couple of things I wanted to bring up. You talked about the variety of coverages. Okay. Mm-hmm. You talked about multi-motion on offense. Sark talked about Quinn checking into those plays, those runs for Jaden Blue. What's the value of the experience on this team right now? Because those are all things that it takes usually. I mean, multi-motion is one of those smaller things. What's the value of experience right now? Because that seems to me to be a defining aspect of it, of being able to create a variety of coverages, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a great. I didn't even think about that, Bobby, but you're right, because you can't have that much creativity, and you can't get exotic and do different things and break tendency like that if you don't have veteran players you can depend on. You're right about it. And the multi-motion stuff too, and playoff experience on top of that. Not just experience, playoff experience. The only team with playoff experience from last season. I didn't think about that, but I agree with that. It's something you really can't quantify right now. I don't know if we can quantify that. I don't know if we can. Yeah.
All right. I have one last question for you before we let you go here, Rod, on this second watch with Rod Babers. The big play on the goal line by Bill Norton. I know you watched that multiple times, probably rewound it. Yeah. Did he just beat his guy and really stuff that? It looked like Barron Sorrell really pinched inside to compress space on that run play. But Bill Norton, just a whale of a play, you think?
Yeah, just won his one-on-one. Not his one, it dominated his one-on-one. I mean, he stood the guy up in the hole, was able to shed the guy and then go make the play. That is, on the goal line of that situation, that's some grown man stuff. I mean, that's legendary. Guys, I don't know if we gave enough props to that last night on the post game, man. A couple of nights on the post game, we should have gave him a little bit more props. That was a hell of a play. I went back and watched it like 4 or 5 times, and it was just all grown man out there.
Yeah, that's what I saw too. I was like, he literally just won his matchup and defeated that play, because I think if he doesn't make that play, there's space. Yeah.
No, it does. It's because I'm saying there was space, because it didn't collapse on it immediately. And if he doesn't just beat his guy, I think there is room for them to make a push there to penetrate.
Yeah, I agree. All right, that'll do it. I want to say thank you once again to our sponsor. That is Dr. Brett Robin, the former Texas running back. He knows what it takes to stay in the game, and he's here for athletes of all ages. He specializes in musculoskeletal health. He treats joint pain, injuries with a conservative approach first, but also offers advanced surgical options, including arthroscopic procedures, fracture management, and even total joint replacements if needed. With convenient offices in Austin, Georgetown, and Killeen, Dr. Robin is accepting new patients now. So if you're looking for a top-notch orthopedic specialist and need something done here in the new year as it's coming about with us, give Dr. Robin a call, set up an appointment, 512-856-1000, 512-856-1000, and get back to your active lifestyle and doing what you love. All right, Rod B, Longhorns are next up, and our next second watch with Rod B will be after the Peach Bowl. Texas playing on New Year's Day against Arizona State. Rod, thanks so much for this episode, and I'll talk to you again soon, bud. You have a good one.
Thank you, brother. Hook 'em.
All right, hook 'em.